Good morning, Rebecca Vigas, the writer whisperer here from a cloudy South Central Kentucky. Hoping all of you had a wonderful holiday. I want to talk to you today about emotions. Yours, your characters, your readers. Part of it comes from two of the books I've read in the last 2 weeks. Last week and a half, probably. In one of them, the mother is an Army reservist and she is a helicopter pilot. She gets called up and has to go to Afghanistan. Her husband resents the fact that she is in the military and wants nothing to do with it. They have 2 children. And the last thing he said to her before she left was, "I don't think I love you anymore." Not really the best mindset for going off to war. And she's gone. And she's gone. And she's gone. And she's seems like forever to her 2 children who are young. Her daughter's the oldest, and she has to start kindergarten with no mom there to take her to school, but dad does. Dad is moved back home and he's finding out that there's a lot more to being mom than he ever dreamed there was. And his wife has left him a little notebook full of things he needs to do. It's not a honey-do list. It's we have pancakes this day, cereal this day, French toast this day, bacon and eggs this day. So and so needs to be here. There are soccer games, whatever there are that dad has not been there for. He tends to be let mom take care of it and apologize for not showing up. It is a heart-wrenching story because you see what's happening on the home front and you see what's happening in Afghanistan. And it gets even more devastating when her copter is shot down. So there is a lot in there. And there was a note in the front of the book that said, "Don't cry while reading this. Crying makes it hard to read." Well, yes, if you are crying tears, it's very hard to read. And it said, "Love, Mom," because it had been my mom's book. Okay, so I read that one. I read the next one, and I kept thinking, this girl is such a ditz. But as it evolved, she really wasn't. She's very intelligent and smart enough to know that the guy she was going to marry wasn't the guy she was interested in, and he didn't really love her. He had an affair going with someone else. So happy ending there, but a plot twist in it. The third story in the book was a Sherlock Holmes written by Anthony Horowitz. And let me tell you, if you didn't know up front that the author was Anthony Horowitz, you would have believed it was Sir Conan Doyle. No. You would have believed it was the original author. Anyway, now we're in the 4th book. And I am once again crying my eyes out. There was no warning on this one. other than I knew it was called A Christmas Note. And you have a young mother with 2 children moving into a condo not far from her own mother's because her husband was injured. Where else? Afghanistan, Iraq, somewhere over there. And he's in a hospital in Germany. And she's already been there and spent time with him. And when his parents showed up, it was time for her to go home and finish the move that they had already planned to make, because when his tour was done, he had his 20 years in the service and he was done. So they move into this condo and they meet the lady next door, who tends to be a little off. She's a nice lady, but she doesn't have much to say or anything. And a guy shows up at her door wanting to know if she's Ramona's daughter. And she says, "No, I'm Miriam's daughter." "Well, Ramona's daughter lives here and I can't remember her name." And her son says, "Well, Melissa lives next door. That's her." Well, she's gone to work. "Okay, well, tell her that her mom died last night and she's got a week to clean out her apartment." Seriously? You're leaving this to a stranger to tell another stranger? They've said maybe 5 words? Seriously? And she doesn't do it that night, even though she sees Melissa come home. She goes over the next morning. Or the next evening, and takes her some chicken and dumplings that a friend had made because they just moved in, and it was more than she and her mom and her kids could eat. So she just took a bowl over to Melissa. And she says, "This isn't the only reason I'm here. I'm here because your mother's landlord showed up at my door." What has she done now? Is the question. Well, she died and he wants you to have her apartment cleaned out in a week. She said, "He can just junk it all. I don't care," and closed the door. Her mother's name is Ramona, and Ramona is an alcoholic, possibly a drug user. Um, has a boyfriend for no more than 2 months ever. And her house is a revolving door. And the last conversation Melissa had with Ramona was that she was not giving her $100 to feed her habit. She's done. She's had it. At 39 years of age, she's done. So on the day of the funeral, Gretchen, the next door neighbor, shows up. And they chat for a little bit. And Gretchen says, "If you want help cleaning out your mom's stuff, I'll help." And Melissa looks at her and says, "When?" She says, "You tell me." She says, "How about tomorrow?" And Gretchen says, "I'll get my mom to come early and we'll go over. We can go in separate cars. I'll follow you." And that's what they do. Oh my gosh. As it turns out, Ramona's left a note for Melissa saying, "You have a brother and sister," but she never got any farther in telling her how to find them. She begins her search. Um, Kyle's able to walk and they're going to send him home to Texas for rehab. And so she calls her dad because she's going to fly to Texas to be with him during rehab. And her mom and dad are going to watch the kids. Her parents are separated, divorced. So he flies in from Arizona, and Gretchen calls her mom and invites her over for coffee. And her mom comes in, and here's her dad. And they've not spoken probably since the divorce. Long story short is the first person Melissa is able to find is her younger sister. And she shows up at Gretchen's and she runs in. She's not even been introduced to Gretchen's dad, and she throws her arms around him. Because her long lost sister is Gretchen. And they have a brother out there. Gretchen's always known she was adopted, but she had no desire to find her birth mother and had no idea she had siblings. There are some other things going on in here, and I'm not going to spoil the story, but I cried all during breakfast because this author was able to touch my heartstrings. If you cannot make your characters feel real enough to pull on somebody's heartstrings, to make them angry for the character, or to make them laugh, your characters just aren't good enough. Put your own emotions into situations. How would you react? I'm moving some stuff so I can get to books. I'm looking for one in particular. And I don't want to knock stuff off this table because that would be a travesty. Because something would break. And I'm not finding the book I'm looking for, which is, there it is. Typical of my life. I didn't think to grab it first. So give me a minute. Because this character in this book made me walk away from this book numerous times because I was infuriated with this teenager. Let me find her here. They talk to different teachers. Here's one. They've been talking to different teachers about an attempted suicide at the school. And Tom Maxwell is Macy McVannell's partner. And Tom comes back into the room with a woman trailing behind him. Lunch is taken care of. We don't have a thing to worry about. I met Mrs. Dawson waiting outside. He gestured to the woman. They are sending for Kara. Mrs. Dawson, this is my partner, Detective Sergeant Macy McVannell. I shook hands with Mrs. Dawson and motioned for her to have a seat. Thank you for coming so quickly. They cannot interview students without a parent. Okay. I want to know what happened with Michelle as much as anyone. Plus, I don't want my daughter being the next one, she said in a rush. The next one, what? Mrs. Dawson. I pounced on the comment. The next one those awful girls target for ridicule. Just then, Kara Dawson entered the room. She saw her mother and rushed to her side. Oh, Mom, did you hear about Michelle? She said in anguish. Mrs. Dawson hugged her daughter. I did. It's why these police officers want to talk to you. She looked at both Tom and me. It was the first time she realized she was not alone with her mother. I can't talk to them. Why not? I asked, thinking it had something to do with girl drama. I don't want to be a target. I'm not a snitch, she said defensively. Was Michelle a snitch? Tom asked. No, she made the mistake of dating Chelsea's boyfriend, Kara informed him. Who's Chelsea? I asked. This was a new name for us. Chelsea Patton is the most popular girl in class. She's dating the captain of the football team, Matt Alexander. Or at least she was until he asked Michelle out. Kara was absently twisting her long brown hair as she answered, How does someone get this kind of photo taken? Tom asked, slamming the picture onto the table in front of Kara. No one gets to date Chelsea's boyfriend but Chelsea. If you cross her, she will make your life hell, she responded without looking at the picture. Do you have any idea who took this? I demanded, having trouble keeping my voice even. I was angry at her reluctance to help her friend. A bunch of the girls were in the locker room the day it was taken. They were all friends of Chelsea's. I don't know for sure who took it. Her big blue eyes looked directly at me as if defying the accusation. When did it show up on the internet? I asked calmly, trying to regain my composure. Thursday. It started showing up on the net and cell phones after all over school, Kara said. She looked at her mom for support. Kara, tell them everything you know, her mother urged. It showed up during fourth hour computer class. The teacher had everyone delete it, but it kept showing up everywhere. Someone printed it and taped it on her locker. Michelle was beside herself. She went home early on Thursday. I tried to call her, but she wasn't picking up her phone. Kara was softly crying. Did you get the awful thing on your phone? Her mother asked. I got it 6th hour of the day everyone started getting it. I thought it was photoshopped, where someone put someone's head on a different body, she explained. I had heard of photoshopping, but I never thought I would see kids doing this to each other. Michelle's was worse because it was a real-time photo. Did you know who sent it to you? Is your phone with you now? Tom asked. His patience with this situation was running thin. Kara reached into her pocket and pulled out her cell phone. She looked at her mother and slowly handed it to me. I flipped it open and quickly found her photo messages. I looked at Tom and said, Take down this number. He nodded as I reeled off a phone number and wrote it down. Tom looked at Mrs. Dawson. I want to thank you for coming in, Mrs. Dawson. We have no more questions for Kara at this time, but we may at some time later. We'd like your permission to keep her phone for a while, and it will be returned to her before she goes home today. So Kara and her mom leave, but not before Macy sends a text. Come to office. Cops caught someone. As the next thing we know, as Mrs. Dawson walks to the office area and asks the secretary to ask the students who are already there to leave for their 15 minutes or so. The next thing we know, a young lady came rushing into the office. She stopped in her tracks when she saw Tom and I. Tom motioned her in. As she entered, he said, I'm Detective Maxwell. Tom Maxwell, you will join my partner, Detective. Will you join my partner, Detective Sergeant Macy McVannell, and me in the principal's office, please? The girl nodded and started toward the office. I looked at the secretary and said, get her parents here now. She started dialing the phone. She sat in one of the chairs at the table, her brown eyes curiously taking us in as she tossed her long brown hair over her shoulder. She knew all the right moves to make us think she was something special. I could see right through her actions. These were the actions of mean girls everywhere. She glanced at the photo lying there. Amazingly, her face showed no emotion. I closed the door and we sat across from her. Your parents will be here shortly. The only question we are going to ask you is your name, I said firmly. Before she could answer, there was a knock on the door. Tom rose to answer it and stepped into the outer office. Both the secretary and the tech guy were there. He deferred to the secretary. Her parents are both on the way. They don't want her questioned until they arrive. I suspect they will arrive with a lawyer, she said simply. He nodded his head and assured the woman the only information we had asked from her was her name. Oh, she's Chelsea Patton. Somehow he was not surprised, yet doubted she took the photo, as she would not want any incriminating evidence on her phone. Can you tell me if it originated with her or did someone else send the photo? I'll check. I just know a mass mailing was sent out by her, he replied. Thanks for your help. Let me know when you find out where she got the photo from. He left and Tom walked to the secretary. I need to have Chelsea's CA 60 file, the cumulative academic and attendance file kept on students by the school system starting in kindergarten. Okay, Chelsea, I've probably read to you about her before, is a witch with a capital B, and there's no getting around it. And she manipulates everyone. And there's nothing more satisfying than her having to put her hands behind her back and being walked out of the school in cuffs at the end of a class period where everyone's going to see her. Imagine being someone so awful that people want to commit suicide rather than be in your presence. How terrible is that? And she's not the first girl to be bullied by this gal and her little cronies. I wonder how many others have tried to kill themselves. There is a serious plot twist at the end of this book that does not get resolved until the last book in the series, because we learn a lot more about Chelsea in book 3, and in book 4 it all comes to a head. And things aren't at all what they seem. But you get angry with the Chelseas in the world who, for some reason, seem to think being mean to other girls is the way to do things. And it's not. So your writing prompt today is to take one of your characters. I don't care if it's a main character or a secondary character, and create a scene in which they have to react with emotion. Crying, laughing, being fearful, deep sadness or depression. You figure it out. But create this scene. If you can do it with a main character, that's the best to do it with, because you get to know the character better. If you can do it with all your characters, oh wow, you're onto something. My characters have to react, because if they don't touch a chord in my reader. My readers don't want to read anymore if they don't like my characters. In Secrets, where the librarian is killed in the first 4 pages, Chief Buck Wise goes back in his own time when he was a kid and he first met Miss Emily and talks about his memories of her. And because some of those memories are so poignant, you get a very clear picture of who the librarian was and why it is such a tragedy when someone kills her. It's always a tragedy when someone is killed, but why this is a community tragedy and not just a family tragedy, because they are different things. So go write your emotional scene and meet me back here tomorrow at 10, and we'll carry on. Happy writing.